Amigo, amigo, yo quiero que me comprenda.
Hey, so Dad, I was looking through the old photo albums and I saw a bunch of pictures of you in like old workers' clothes in the field.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering how did you get over to Mexico?
Well, it was a long process. In Mexico, we lived in a small town, Durango, and then it was basically nothing there. It was just all dried out land. There was no work. We were like starving. So my friend told me that the United States was looking for some workers, and that there was opportunities over here. So I had to take that gamble and chance. So me and him, we signed up for this program. I think it was called the Bracero program, and that's how we got over here. And the fields was it was really tough because we were discriminated every day, and like we wouldn't get breaks. Sometimes we didn't get paid for our work, and but fortunately I met your mother. Before legally entering the United States, there would be checkpoint stations just south of the border, like one famous station in Juarez, Chihuahua, across from El Paso, Texas. Officers would check the Mexican nationals' hands and look for callous identifications to conclude that they were qualified to work in the fields. Officers would also gather fingerprints and documents to conclude the legal work. The final step was to spray all the workers with DDT to get rid of any unwanted insects, as well as diseases like typhus and malaria. In 1942, the Bracero program was enacted by executive order to prevent shortages in the agricultural business due to the United States entering World War II. The Bracero program was a bilateral agreement between the United States and Mexico to allow millions of Mexican men to come to the United States and work in the agricultural field. The contract promised same pay as native workers, free housing, decent meals, and free transportation back to Mexico. However, in reality, mostly all Mexican workers who came to the United States through this program were treated unfairly and discriminated against, got paid significantly less than the native wage rate, had horrible overcrowding living conditions, and poor food options. By the time the program was shut down by the U.S. government in 1964, 4.6 million Mexican nationals were legally contracted for work.
Hispanic women have traditionally been valued as supported spouses. Nevertheless, the primary role emphasized for women in Hispanic tradition is that of a mother instead of a wife. This leads women to define themselves through their family and children instead of independently or as part of a couple. Women are expected to be submissive and sacrifice themselves for their families. Her overall role in the family is cooking, childbearing, raising the children, teaching the children morals, their role in the family, and tending to her husband. She's also the one to teach her daughters the role of a woman, as well as skills such as cooking, cleaning, sewing, and how to behave. The roles of women in Hispanic culture varies, especially those who become more Americanized and depending on their class in society. Daughter roles in a Mexican American culture were seen as important. As a daughter, I was expected to learn the domestic tasks of my mother, which included cleaning, cooking, and taking care of younger siblings. Daughters were also expected to be obedient of their parents at all times. As a daughter, I didn't have much say in anything. I did what my parents ordered me to. On top of that, I didn't have any freedom. I wasn't allowed to go out with my friends unless my parents were there.
So how did you meet Dad?
I met your father in the citrus farm me and my parents worked. In order to survive, me and my brothers helped out at the farm doing as much as possible. We got paid by how much citrus fruit we packaged. The pay was ridiculously little, but every day we tried to package as much as we can to earn just enough to keep ourselves alive and well. One day, I was trying to package more citrus fruit than I usually do, and due to the heat and dehydration, I ended up passing out. Thanks to your father, I was able to recover. He lifted me up and tried to get me to drink some of his water. I was really thankful for him for his help. After that day, our lives changed forever.
Marriage for Mexican Catholics is an important milestone. It is traditional for the potential groom to ask the bride's family to marry the bride. After the family and the bride agreed to the marriage, the woman was no longer able to interact with potential suitors. Once the couple got engaged, they chose godparents or padrinos and padrinas to serve as role models and give advice to them.
Dos tontos, y yo que no veía la hora de tenerte en mis brazos y poderte decir.
A traditional dance in a Mexican wedding is the dollar dance. During the dance, relatives take turns dancing with the bride and groom. The relatives pin money on the newlyweds' clothes, and they dance with them, allowing the couple to spend time with each of their guests.
The zoot suit culture was a fascination between fashion and music. Both Mexican American and African American young adults would wear big and baggy suits that would be tailored to the individual style. Stripe patterns, bold colors, large chains, and hats would be common in order to distinguish themselves from non-zoot suit members. The zoot suit generation was tied into the jazz culture. Many of these youths would go to dance parties or halls around Los Angeles to express themselves and get away from the daily discrimination and prejudices from Anglo-Americans as well as military personnel.
The way that women dress during this time period is very important because it stands out from other styles and it mimics the style their male counterparts upheld during this time as well. The way they dressed was a political statement that defeated all odds and at times made them a target in the society because of difference in their attire. The Mexican-American women's zoot suit wore V-neck sweaters or a long-shouldered coat, a knee-length pleated skirt, fishnets or bobby socks, platform heels, or saddle shoes. Dark lipstick. She put on the same style of zoot suits that her male counterparts wore. In the 1940s, pachucos and pachucas represented a new generation of Mexican-American youth and created a new look.
Oh yeah, and that reminds me of the time we were part of the Zoot Suit riots when those sailors were beating us up in the middle of the streets.
Oh my god, that was the worst time ever. I remember getting a big black eye.
Yeah, we were all on the floor, curled up.
I tried to get after them, but they just took off.
Yeah, those freaking losers burned all our suits.
I know. And the stupid part was the freaking cops took us to jail
I know.
because they thought it was our fault. Starting May 31st, 1943, and the days following, servicemen who returned from the war and were stationed in LA purposely targeted Zoot Suits and began beating them up, tearing off their suits, and cutting their hair in public, while the Los Angeles Police Department stared and did nothing to stop the violence. Many Zoot Suit members were also wrongfully arrested for self-defending themselves and were put in jail with no charges against them. This riot occurred due to the propaganda against Zoot Suit members claiming that they were gang members and a danger to society.
Por Dios, ¿qué será de mí? Esta linterna tan opaca que no me alumbra.
I remember when I almost got deported in 1954 because of the immigration law. In May of 1954, an immigration law called Operation Wetback was enforced to combat the problem of illegal Mexican immigrants crossing over the United States. The program hired 750 Border Patrol officers by the border. Most of the resources obtained during this program were positioned by the border. However, some resources were situated in main cities. Since discrimination was still very high during this time, there would be instances where the police officers would capture legal Mexican workers and hand them over to the Border Patrol Department for deportation.
Bad boys, what you want, what you want, what you gonna do when you shut the jump don't come for you? Tell me what you wanna do, what you wanna do. Yeah, bad boys, what you gonna do, what you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, what you gonna do, what you gonna do when they come for you? When you were 8 and you had bad traits, you go to school and learn the golden rule. So why are you acting like a bloody fool? If you get hot, then you must get cool. Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? You chuck it on that one, you chuck it on this one, you chuck it on your mother and you chuck it on your father, you chuck it on your brother and you chuck it on your sister, you chuck it on that one and you chuck it on me. Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come?
Why do you look so upset?
Mom, I'm just so mad. I can't even speak Spanish. I'm with my own friends, and I can't even learn about my own history. I'm just so frustrated. That's why I walked out today.
School? I did too. All the Latino kids are doing it. Today when I was in class and I was talking in Spanish, the teacher yelled at me.
I understand it was pretty hard, or it's hard being discriminated against and stuff, but you have to look at it through my perspective and your mom's. We didn't go to school at all. We couldn't afford it. It wasn't available. We were working all of our childhood and lives, adulthood, working in the fields day in, day out, barely making a living just so you guys can go to school. You know, so you shouldn't just, I don't know,
Take it for granted.
take it for granted.
But Dad, you don't understand what's going on in the schools today.
The East LA student walkouts for educational reform, also known as the East LA blowouts, occurred in the year 1968. Mexican Americans had the highest high school dropout rate and the lowest college attendance compared to any other ethnic groups. In class, students were forbidden from speaking Spanish, and they were disencouraged from counselors to attend college. Schools denied teaching Mexican American history, and several Mexican American administrators and teachers weren't allowed to work because of their backgrounds. The goal of the East LA blowouts was to create a bilingual and bicultural education. It aimed to create more careers for Latino teachers and administrators and to include Mexican American history in textbooks. From March 1st through the 8th of 1968, approximately 15,000 students walked out from several East LA high schools. The protesters demanded an equal and qualitative education. Though several were jailed or escorted, the walkouts resulted in the creation of organizational groups like the United Mexican American Students Young Citizens for Community Action, and the Brown Berets. Although most of the demands from students weren't met, the walkouts unified and empowered the East LA community.